Okay, so we're talking about continental drift and seafloor spreading. So these are two theories that came from scientists way back when. So our first theory is continental drift. Uh, we see the evidence now, but back when he did it, there was not very much evidence to prove that this idea had any, uh, let's call it, connection to what geologists thought then. So he was a meteorologist, and he proposed that at one point in time, Pangea, or the one continent, was contained all the continents of the Earth. He hypothesized that they have since drifted apart, and this was continental drift. So this is his idea of how they would basically line up. There's only one ocean, there's a Pacific Ocean, and gradually they would spread apart. So his evidence was based on land features. So if you were to piece the mountain ranges lining up in the continents together, they fit together. They fit very well together, actually. If you take them all, it kind of looks like they could have once been together. There's also evidence of fossils showing that there are different animals that are of the same species, same plants, same animals that are on separate land masses. That doesn't really make much sense why they would be the exact same thing in a different place. And there's also evidence of climate change. So there's glaciers and scratches from rocks or from those glaciers in places that are much more mild today than they would have been back then. But nobody could figure out how they would float away from each other. So Wagner was very much considered a moron by geologists of the time. First of all, he's a meteorologist playing with rocks, basically, as far as they're concerned. And he had no real evidence, he just had circumstantial evidence. But in 1960, Harry Hess comes up with the idea of seafloor spreading. So Harry Hess is actually working for the Navy during World War II in submarine warfare. So he's actually starting to see evidence of this idea of continental drift under the water. So he comes up with the theory of seafloor spreading. So seafloor spreading is when the seafloor spreads apart along sides of mid-ocean ridges, which is basically like under mountain water ranges, and new crust is added. So as this happens, it's like a conveyor belt. It carries the continent along with them. So they will move apart based on the new magma that's being put into the crust. And his evidence for that was he had molten material. So the pillow-shaped rocks formed molten material that erupts and hardly quickens. So that would make sense. So you see this molten material coming out, and it's hardening very quickly, creating this new crust. Evidence from magnetic strips, so rocks that lie in pattern showing records of reversals in the Earth's magnetic field, showing that there's movement underneath the Earth's crust. And then there's evidence from drilling samples, so that rocks that were further from the ridge were actually older than the ones closer. So his idea is eventually the seafloor sinks into deep underwater canyons called deep ocean trenches, and we know now that to be true because we see how deep these trenches go based on how deep we've been in submarines. This allows part of the ocean floor to sink back into the mantle, and over time, just like that conveyor belt idea, it will continue to create new crust, and older crust will sink into those trenches. And this idea is actually had a lot more hard evidence than the continental drift theory. So seafloor spreading actually started to catch on. And I would suggest watching this on the history of seafloor spreading with Bill Nye. It's pretty interesting. Just look it up on YouTube and you'll find it. All right, go ahead and move on to part 4B.